Welcome to today's Explainer. You know, we take totally everyday things like just taking a single breath or digesting our lunch completely for granted. But right now, at this very second, there is a fascinating, literally life-sustaining engine powering everything from your lungs to the food that plants make. So today, we're going to demystify this invisible engine. We're talking about diffusion. Here's the game plan for today. We'll quickly define what diffusion actually is, unpack this thing called the concentration gradient, look at how we exchange life-saving gases and transport essential solutes, and finally wrap up with how to control diffusion speed.
All right, part one. What is diffusion? The microscopic movement powering life. So, to start, we have to look at the sheer logistical nightmare of how our cells actually get their nutrients and dump their waste, all without us ever having to think about it. And it boils down to this key definition. Diffusion is the net movement of particles from a region of higher concentration to a region of lower concentration. But honestly, the absolute most important part to remember here is that this happens as a result of their random movement. There's no biological traffic controller telling these particles where to go. It's driven entirely by this random motion, just naturally moving from an area where it's super crowded to an area where there's plenty of space.
Now, you might be wondering why this movement happens in the first place, right? Well, all these molecules, whether we're talking about a gas, a liquid, or a dissolved substance, naturally possess kinetic energy. Basically, they're in constant motion, just continuously bouncing off of one another. And because of this kinetic energy, they'll keep spreading out over time until they reach a state where their concentration everywhere is exactly the same. They just want to be perfectly evenly distributed.
Moving on to part two, the concentration gradient, which is the true driving force of this movement.
So let's see how that random bouncing builds into a really vital concept biologists call a concentration gradient. Simply put, a gradient exists whenever there's a natural imbalance. If you've got a situation where the concentration of a substance is way higher in one specific area than it is in a neighboring area, well, boom, you have a concentration gradient. And this gradient is the fundamental driving force for literally everything we're covering today.
Think of it like this. Imagine a crowded room packed shoulder to shoulder with people. Suddenly, a door opens up to a huge, wide, spacious hallway. People are naturally going to flow right out that door, right? Particles act the exact same way. They naturally flow down the gradient, escaping a crowded, high-concentration area to spread out in a less crowded, low-concentration area.
To picture this actually working in a living thing, let's look at a single cell. When a cell uses up oxygen to respire, the internal oxygen levels inside that cell drop. And because the oxygen level outside the cell is now higher than it is inside, it instantly creates a concentration gradient. That natural imbalance effortlessly draws fresh oxygen straight across the cell membrane and inside, keeping the cell alive. It's brilliant.
But before we dive deeper into the biology, we gotta pause and ask a pretty big question. Why does this microscopic, seemingly random bouncing of particles actually matter to us on a massive, macro, life-or-death scale?
That brings us to part 3, exchanging life-saving gases, breathing, and photosynthesis. Okay, the stakes here are absolute. If diffusion stops, aerobic respiration stops. And if aerobic respiration stops, life stops. It's that simple. Different living things rely on this incredible mechanism in their own unique ways to swap out life-saving gases. For humans, we need a totally reliable source of oxygen for aerobic respiration, which happens when oxygen diffuses into our blood. Meanwhile, photosynthetic plants are doing the exact opposite. They need carbon dioxide, which diffuses into their leaves so they can actually produce glucose from sunlight. Now let's step back and look at the whole lung. Inside our lungs, oxygen efficiently diffuses from the alveoli, where the concentration is super high, directly into the surrounding capillaries, where it binds to our red blood cells. At the exact same time, this process works in reverse to pull harmful carbon dioxide out of our blood before it can build up. All while plants do the exact same trick. Carbon dioxide diffuses through tiny little pores called stomata in the leaves, travels through the air spaces, and packs right into the palisade cells, which are loaded with chloroplasts. Actually, even the oxygen that plants need for their own respiration enters through those exact same stomata.
All right, part 4. Transporting essential solutes. Moving nutrients where they belong.
Let's step away from gases for a second and look at how our bodies and plants transport other crucial dissolved materials, which are known as solutes. This is absolutely essential across the board for nutrition and waste management. In plants, root hair cells use diffusion to pull dissolved mineral ions like nitrates and magnesium straight out of the soil.
Inside our own bodies, the ileum of our small intestine relies on it to absorb vital water-soluble vitamins, like vitamin B, right into the bloodstream. And down in our kidneys, diffusion is doing the heavy lifting yet again, reabsorbing essential mineral ions and urea so our internal chemistry stays perfectly balanced.
And finally, Part 5, Controlling Diffusion Speed. The 4 factors of efficiency.
Let's kind of treat this process like an instructional manual and look at the actual physical mechanics here. There are 4 strict rules that dictate how fast a substance diffuses across a wall or a membrane. Rule number 1, surface area. A larger surface area means a faster rate of diffusion. Number 2, temperature. Higher temperatures speed things up. Number 3, the concentration gradient. A steeper gradient, meaning a greater difference in concentration across the membrane, equals a much faster rate. And number 4 is diffusion distance. A greater physical distance to travel means a slower rate of diffusion.
Let's just isolate temperature for a second, because it links back perfectly to what we learned earlier. A simple rise in temperature directly injects molecules with way more kinetic energy. This extra energy acts like a massive speed boost, allowing these ions and molecules to move, bounce around, and spread out so much faster than they would in a lower temperature environment, where they'd be a lot more sluggish.
And what's so cool is that biological structures have actually evolved to optimize for these exact physics rules in real life. Remember the rule about surface area? Well, our intestinal epithelial cells are covered with hundreds of tiny little projections called microvilli, completely by design to maximize surface area and skyrocket the rate of absorption. And what about the rule of diffusion distance? In our lungs, both the alveoli and the surrounding capillaries are just one single cell thick. Nature intentionally minimizes the distance to dramatically speed up gas exchange. It's a perfect system.
As we wrap up today's explainer, I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder. If the simple, completely random, invisible bouncing of microscopic particles, guided by nothing but gradients and surface areas, is the true engine silently keeping our organs functioning and entire forests growing, well, what other hidden rules of physics are secretly sustaining our world right now? Keep questioning, keep looking closer, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.